Hello, and welcome to AFM's focus on the development of a bond consolidated tape. I'm Victoria Webster, Director of Fixed Income at AFME, and I'm delighted to be joined today by Chris Murphy, who is CEO at Ediphy. Chris, welcome, and thank you for joining us today. How are you?
Vicky, I'm great, thanks, and thanks so much for having me.
No problem at all. Now, as many people may be aware, the MiFID II regulatory framework mentioned the development of a consolidated tape, which would basically contain information about the trades that have been executed. But at the time, there was no appetite from private companies to take this notion forward. We've recently seen an increased push from the European regulators to move forward with a consolidated tape as part of its review of MiFID II, which is currently being undertaken. And one company that I keep hearing about is Ediphy, a London data provider that is stepping up to the challenge and developing a bond consolidated tape. Chris, maybe you can tell me a little about your background and what motivated you to found Ediphy.
Sure. I guess my background is coming up to 27 years in the investment banking industry. I held senior leadership roles at Morgan Stanley, where I ran the European rates business, and then moved on to UBS, where latterly I ran the global fixed income business. Really, throughout my time in those two organizations, I felt the need to constantly innovate, particularly around the deployment of technology within the business. And towards the end of my stint at UBS, I kind of realized that actually all of these businesses are fundamentally data first businesses. They are digitally only businesses. And so with Ediphy, what we decided to do was build a capital markets business from scratch, from the ground up, in a single code base that allows us to keep all of this data in sync and delivers integrated solutions for our clients.
Perfect. So, given your background, you've clearly seen the market from several different angles, and also understand the challenges around data, which I assume is the drive behind your focus. But from what I've read and understand about your company, whilst technology is clearly a key component of what Ediphy is delivering, I'm getting a sense that it's more than just about the technology. Would that be right?
Absolutely, yeah. So culture is incredibly important in any business, and when you're setting out to build a new business, it gives you this great opportunity to engineer the culture that you really want. And so, whilst we set out not just to build great technology which delivers services our clients need, but we really wanted to operate with a certain ethos and set of principles at the heart of what we do. So, fairness and transparency are really core to everything. And our aim overall as a company is to help improve the efficiency of financial markets.
That's very refreshing to hear. And indeed, an approach like that helps build the foundations of a very solid fintech business. Now, in my introduction, I briefly mentioned MiFID II. It's certainly hard to have any industry based conversations without it creeping in somewhere. But for those that have perhaps not been recently immersed in MiFID II speak, and especially the consolidated tape, maybe you can run us through some background to help set the scene.
Absolutely, yeah. So a key part of the MiFID II regulation, which came into force in January 2018, was the transparency regime. And overall, it aimed to encourage greater fairness through better price discovery and therefore, hence, fostering deeper liquidity in some of these markets. The regime covers both equities and non-equities. And essentially, it's a requirement for every trade with a European nexus to be made public. Now, the rules are set out in what are referred to as the regulatory technical standards, the so-called RTSs. RTS1 covers the equity world, and everything else, including fixed income, is covered under RTS2. Now, obviously, this requirement was pretty revolutionary for the fixed income markets, where traditionally those markets have operated on a principal bilateral and OTC basis, where unless you were party to the trade, you'd have no idea that the trade had actually happened. But now activity executed on trading venues are covered, and those entities need to make that data public. But also activities not executed on trading venues also need to be made public with firms, whether they be systematic internalizers, so traditionally sell-side firms, or indeed the underlying investment firms, sometimes on the buy side. They need to be providing their transaction data to what are called APAs, approved publication arrangements. There's a lot of terminology in MiFID, as we know. These APAs then provide that data to the public. So it was anticipated right throughout the legislation that CTPs, a consolidated tape provider, would emerge to combine all of this data into a single tape of record. But for a number of reasons, that has not yet occurred.
Thank you, Chris. And yes, you've just managed to condense one of the biggest bits of financial information into a few points, which is commendable. And that last point about combining trade data from the trading venues and the APAs is especially important. Given the data is fragmented and currently sort of non-standardized, it does make it very hard to access and also interpret. So a consolidated tape will be able to pull all that transparency together, making it easier to analyze. Now, there was obviously a long process between MiFID II being developed and the actual implementation. So it's around 7 years since the consolidated tape was first mentioned in the MiFID consultations. Why has it taken until now for a potential consolidated tape provider to emerge?
Well, I think one has to be somewhat generous to the regulators when they put together this regulation. In that it was quite difficult to imagine all of the various scenarios that could perhaps impede the creation of a CTP. So the way we think about it is there are two sets of challenges here under the current framework. One is around the commercial challenge, and two is around more of the technical challenge. So just a moment on the commercial challenges. Firstly, we think the big impediment is that as the rules are defined right now, any entity that wishes to become a CTP must go out and collect a sufficient amount of the data in order to be regulated as an official CTP. So that creates a huge burden on any entity to go out and source this data, often with quite aggressive commercial terms. And so it's a massive outlay upfront for any entity to go out and get all of that data in order to provide it commercially to end users. And then if you couple that with the other requirement in the regulation for the CTP to provide that data free of charge to everyone after 15 minutes in machine readable format, it really destroys the economic viability of anyone stepping in to provide that role. And so we think, that is possibly the major impediment. But also coupled with that, we have the technical impediment. So right now there are around 300 different sources of data that are being provided as part of the regulation, both across the EU regime and the UK regime. The thought of consolidating all of that data and hoping magically you're going to be able to make sense of it immediately, it is somewhat wishful thinking. So there is a certain amount of work that needs to be done in order to clean up the data so that you can have a high quality consolidated tape of record. And we think that the combination of those two things under the current regime have not been encouraged, but we are optimistic that both the work under the EU refit, but also the wholesale markets review in the UK will address both of those concerns.
And this, of course, is where Ediphy steps in. So, Chris, perhaps you can take us through your proposal as a bond consolidated tape provider, and maybe explain a bit why you've decided to step forward now.
Yeah, sure. So I think the market had fully anticipated that one of the existing data vendors out there would step forward with a solution by now. But clearly, some of those incumbents have existing data strategies and data monetization products that they're wishing to preserve. So perhaps the incentive wasn't really there for them to take the risk to actually deliver a full CTP. And right throughout the industry, there are increasing concerns around the rising data costs and lack of transparency. And that again is fueling, as you said right at the outset, such interest in the CT amongst all market players. So as part of our core execution services businesses, we've been collecting this public data for the last 3 years now, and really we've built up quite a bit of expertise in dealing with the data and identifying some of the impediments. And so as we started to show more and more people what we've been doing with the data, such as creating liquidity scores or TCA analysis, we were continually being asked, well, why don't we put ourselves forward to provide a solution? And so, we found ourselves in a position where now, having spoken to a bunch of different stakeholders here, we have moved forward with our initiative where we're saying, look, we can build off some of the work that we've done already and take that to the next level in parallel with some of the work that is being done under the refit process. And we think, the demand has not gone away for this solution to be delivered. And what we're saying to the market is, look, rather than waiting until we've got the rules rewrite and then we do the technical work, we should be doing that alongside and also informing some of the work being done by the regulators as well.
Thank you, Chris. Yeah, it's very interesting to hear. And of course, your thoughts around the actual access to transparency. There is a lot of data out there that's not always easy to be able to come across. So, what are the benefits that a successful consolidated tape will bring to the market outside of those?
Sure. Well, there are two phases here to my answer. So, I guess at the outset of our particular initiative, all the early participants that want to become part of the initiative will start to get early access to the data as we start to consolidate it, and will also help us to shape the design of the final consolidated tape, whether that be the governance design or also the technical design in terms of API accessibility, etc., etc. We also think that there are benefits to creating the prototype CT in parallel to the regulatory process, so we could start to inform that process with real hard data, particularly around some of the discussions around deferral regime, etc., etc. But ultimately, we believe that the final CTP solution will be highly valued by the market overall. The market is crying out for high quality data that covers the entirety of the market. And we believe that if we can provide this to the market at a reasonable price, then many participants will benefit from the final CTP.
Lovely. And ultimately, yes, this high quality data is what the industry is very much looking for. There have been reported data issues in the past, which have definitely improved, but there's still, the odd instances coming up. So I think having a high quality source of data is absolutely valuable. Now, I noticed you've involved the Dutch regulator, the AFM, in your initiative. So what's the significance of that?
Sure. Well, the AFM's team made a very, very clear statement on transparency and the consolidated tape in their June paper. And it demonstrates that they're trying to provide leadership and real tangible interest in progressing this area. Also, you have to note that the Netherlands has become home to, post the end of the transition period, some of the main EU trading venues and APAs in the fixed income space. So they are, definitely viewing transparency as a hot topic on their radar. And so, a considerable part, as we've discussed, of our particular initiative is to try to resolve some of the technical impediments around data format and compliance with some of the data standards. And really, the team at the AFM have said that they're willing to support our initiative and any other initiatives that may emerge that can help them to really make some progress on adherence to the regulations that are currently standing. So we're thrilled to have them as observer participants in our initiative, and watch this space. There are other NCAs that are national competent authorities, other national regulators in Europe that are likewise looking to become observers as well.
Absolutely, that's very important to have them on board as well, and being aware of what's being developed there. Chris, you mentioned earlier some of the commercial challenges that have been an obstacle to developing a tape, but from your proposal, there doesn't actually appear to be much of a commercial drive behind it. So, how will it be funded, and also how do you plan to measure its ultimate success?
Sure. Just coming back to your original question around the drivers for setting up Ediphy, as I touched on there, one of the key areas is we want to try and improve market structure, improve fairness and transparency. And we really think that the right way for the CTP or the consolidated tape to be delivered is via a utility model. So this should be operated as a common good where this data is democratized, and everyone, big and small, has access to the tape of record. So our proposal here is that we're saying that we're happy to build and operate the tape on a cost recovery only model. We don't want to have governance over it. The governance should be independent, and that should be provided by industry experts. And really, we think that that is the best model to encourage healthy market structure as this fixed income market develops. So our model here is that any excess revenues that are monetized through providing the tape will then be funneled back into reducing subscription fees the following year. And really, our goal is also to have this data out there because we think it powers further electronification of the fixed income markets, and that's where our core business is focused.
And you've sent out a call to arms to the market, I think, to get involved in the initiative. What are you asking for from potential participants at this stage?
Sure. Well, because we're trying to build a solution that fits all areas of the market, what we're really saying here is that we would like to have initial participation from as broad a range of market players as possible. So on both sides of the fence, buy side and sell side, each contributing a modest amount of funding to help to build the solution. So we're briefing a whole bunch of market participants on the details of the initiative. And we'd like to thank you at AFME for giving us this opportunity to reach out to some of your members we haven't spoken to bilaterally. And we'd urge anyone that hasn't spoken to us directly to reach out if they're interested in hearing more. We also have a number of similar engagements with some of the buy-side trade bodies. And I think it's fair to say that we have advanced dialogues with a couple of dozen participants right now who are reviewing right now a framework agreement, which we're hoping to sign over the next couple of weeks.
Fantastic. And it's great to see that you're engaging with so many different areas of the market as well. Now, if any of our audience aren't already in contact with you or would like to find out more about Ediphy and your initiative, how should they contact you? What's the best way?
Sure. Well, you can drop us an email at info@ediphy.io, or you can follow us on our Ediphy account on LinkedIn. Our Twitter handle, we have a Twitter handle, Ediphy Group, or indeed just reach out to me directly on LinkedIn or anywhere else you can find me. But there are plenty of places you can find us, and we'd be thrilled to hear from you.
Perfect. Chris, thank you so much for joining me today. It's been very interesting listening to Edify's plans. It sounds like some exciting times ahead, and we do wish you well on your journey.
Thank you, Vicky. Really enjoyed speaking to you today. Thanks.
No problem at all. It's been a pleasure. Thank you.